Today we're going to talk about geography standard number 2, or specifically 1.2. We need to understand the human and physical characteristics of the regions in North Carolina and the overall United States. So we're going to talk about physical geography and we're going to talk about human geography. The first thing, the physical features. We want to know what are the mountains, what are the rivers, what are the streams, what are the valleys, what are the plains, what's the Midwest. So that's physical geography. We're talking about the actual landmass. We also want to try to discover or study the culture. And cultures are different. There are different beliefs, there are different religions, there's different food, there's different music, there's different language across the United States. Like, for example, on your screen you see chicken biscuit and sweet tea. Where I'm from in the north, chicken biscuits and sweet tea really don't exist. No one eats that. It's not part of the culture in that geographical area. This is human geography. It's different in different areas, different beliefs, all kinds of different cultures. Political organizations in different states or different parts of the country, people have different political beliefs. Some people are more liberal, some are more conservative, and you can see that on a map of the last electoral college. Some states voted for the Democrat Barack Obama, some voted for the Republican Mitt Romney. So the people in these different areas have different political beliefs. And then you have ethnic makeup. If you can see on your screen, the greenish yellow color is people who have a common ancestry of African American. You can see in the southeastern United States, that geographical area has more African American culture, more African American influence, more African American people. And you could probably trace that all the way back to slavery. And that's why African Americans tend to live in the South more. And if you look at the North, it tends to be more German, more Caucasian influence. In the Southwest, which is very close to the boundaries between North America and South America, where the Spanish had colonized Mexico. And so we see that there's a large portion of Spanish heritage in the Southwest. These are all things we can study in geography. We're studying the differences and trying to understand the human geography and the physical geography of the United States and North Carolina. So here are 4 things that we're going to go into more detail about. These are broad ideas, big concepts, big themes. You want to have a general understanding. There aren't specific examples that you need to know. You don't have to specifically state things. You need to kind of understand and be able to connect it to things, but you're never going to need to memorize exactly all the changes, all of the political structures, all of the cultures in each particular area. You just want to have the general idea of this area tends to be like this, or the South tends to believe in this, or be made up this way. Now, these are things that you specifically need to know. You need to know what a formal, a functional, and a vernacular region are. You need to know the characteristics of North Carolina's regions, or the regions within the United States. And you also need to know how regions change. So this one's more specific. So let's start with the first standard that we need to realize. Now, as you're going through your notes and you're going through your standards checklist, what you should do is you find the bullet point, and under the bullet point, you want to give me an example. You're going to apply this thing to something that's happened through history. This standard that you need to know to show me that you know this standard, you will write down an example of this standard, showing me you are applying the knowledge to history. You're applying this to American history. For example, let's look. Geographical areas differ according to distinct regional characteristics such as physical, cultural, political, economic activity, and ethnic makeup. So we're basically saying that across the United States, our geographical areas or different locations, they're different for various reasons. The first one I'm showing you is physical. So in some places there are mountains and high elevations. Some places are low. Some places are even below sea level, like New Orleans. There are different elevations. Some places are in the coastal plain. Some places are along rivers or in river valleys. Some places are on the Great Lakes. Some people live in cold weather. Some places have warm weather. Some places it rains more than others. Physically, based on nature, our geography is different. That's one example. Culturally, we are different as well. If you look at this map, you see that dark blue or purple hue. That shows you those in the southeastern area. Those are areas that have an African American history, and with that they probably have African American culture. So if you were to live in that area, African American music, African American religions, which maybe would be connections to baptism, Baptists, and to African roots, and maybe more gospel singing. And you'll see the foods are different. If you go to the north, you're going to see more of a German history. So another example is the cultures are different in different areas. If you move to the Northwest or the Northeast, you're going to experience different people with different beliefs, different histories, different foods. It's all different throughout the country. It differs. An example of political differences. So we see that political organizations or political beliefs. Now these are, on the left side we have some general Democratic beliefs and some general Republican beliefs. They're not all the same. You can mix and match your beliefs and still be a Democrat or a Republican, but we're just using this as an example. So on the left you're going to see some examples of how Democrats tend to vote and how Republicans tend to vote. It is not always like this. Pro-choice versus abortion, or which is opposing abortion. Pro-choice or opposing abortion. You have Democrats that tend to favor gun control, whereas Republicans are more about gun freedom. Medicaid and SNAP, or Democrats tend to believe in government programs that help people out. Republicans don't really like spending a lot of money on trying to help people out. And in return, that means Republicans don't tax you as much because they don't want to run these programs that pay for people to be helped out. Whereas Democrats, they don't mind high taxes to pay for these programs. So if we look, we can see that across the country, in different areas, they have different political views. You could make the assumption or infer that in the Northeast, that these states prefer to have Medicaid. They prefer to have the SNAP program to help people eat. They don't mind the idea of same-sex marriage. Whereas in the South, you're going to make the assumption that these areas, they don't like same-sex marriage. And in fact, that's true. In a lot of these states in the Southeast, there are laws that have outlawed it. So when you go to different places in the area, they often differ on how you believe, what kind of laws should be made, what is the role of the government, what should they and shouldn't they do. Geographically, we can create differences. Economic and here we can see it even a little bit more clear right here. Not just based on state, you can see it individually, each county. You can move 30 miles and move from a little blue spot to a red spot where people believe in completely different ideas. And maybe you're finding yourself on here, Durham will actually be a blue spot where people tend to believe in Democratic views. But if you go to a different area, the views will change. Now you can actually see what was it like in 1936. And you say, well, why was that? Well, in 1936 we were going through the Great Depression. A lot of Americans were in need. And pretty much throughout history, Democrats are usually that party that helps those out in need. And so people all sided with the Democratic Party. And we'll talk more about that in class. Definitely ask questions if you have any. Economic activity differs too, meaning there are businesses, there are jobs, there's wealth. When you see the light colored squares or areas, those are areas that are very wealthy, have a high median income. The dark or dark red, those are areas where people are almost living in poverty or below poverty. So based on where you live and the area determines almost how much money you can make. Is there jobs? Is there economic activity? Is there production? Is there roads that help you do this? And you can look, you'll see West Virginia right here and Kentucky, these and Appalachian Mountains. Those are mountains. There's probably not a lot of factories, probably not a lot of jobs. And if there's not jobs, people aren't spending, they're not making money, and their income is not very high. And this all could go back to early days of the construction of roads and railroads. You're not going to put roads and railroads in the middle of a mountain. You're going to avoid putting those in there. And you're going to see this strip here. I want you to make sure you pay attention to this strip in the southeast, this line of economic activity. If you remember some of the pictures beforehand, you go up here to the African American heritage, you're going to see this strip through the southeast. You go back down to economic activity, and you can see that same strip in the southeast. And we can make some inferences. We can say, based on this data, it could say that African Americans earn less than Caucasians. Why is that? Once we understand that there are differences, we can take the next step to find out why is this happening. How can we fix these problems in the United States? Without geography, we could never tackle these problems. This helps us understand the world around us. So it helps us approach certain problems. You're also going to see more with the culture. This is religion. The red is Baptist. And so if you live in the southeast, you're going to live in an area where most people have the religious beliefs of the Baptists, and maybe in the way they live their lives, in the way they act in public, the way that their government passes laws for each state may reflect Baptist ideas. If you're a Catholic, you may not want to live in these Baptist areas. That's the blue. And so if you're a Catholic and believe in most of the Catholic ideology, then you're going to want to live in a state up here in the blue area. So geography, things differ. It's not just the physical. The people are different in different places, and they believe in different things, and they set up their states and their cities and their governments often how they believe. And this is always my favorite one, the soft drinks. Our language is different. Yeah. Where I'm from in Ohio, we call soft drinks pop. That's the blue. In these southern states, most people refer to any soda, soft drink as Coke. On the East Coast, since I've moved here, I've had to learn to start saying soda. Otherwise, people don't know what I'm referring to. They're all the same thing, but based on our geographic location, the language differs. We have different names. Some people call pancakes flapjacks. The designation of places in different regions may change over time. So remember, write down some examples. So an example here is that in the South, it used to be a very highly liberal area. They voted Democrat. But over time, it's changed. Now it's more Republican and conservative with their views. Another example would be the South today is a free state. We are in free states. Slavery is illegal. But if we went back in time, slavery was legal. So things change. Laws change, people change, beliefs change. Now the rate of change may be different. There's a link you can click on if you check this out. It shows how the country went from slave states to free states. The northern states abolished slavery a lot quicker than the southern states, and one of the main reasons why was because they didn't have cotton fields. And so different areas change at a different rate. They advance differently. They get new laws differently. Here are the last states to join the Union and abolish slavery. And so in that same way, now we can see, remember those southern states here? Now let's look at these states. These are the statistics, the probability that a student has a white classmate. If it's red, then it means it's probably not the case. And so here in the South, integration of schools was supposed to happen in the 1950s, in the 1960s, meaning African Americans and white students or Caucasian students and any minority, they go to the same schools. But you'll see in the South still that a lot of schools are not necessarily integrated. Things have not changed. Some places change a little bit slower than others. Some change faster. Here we'll see if you're in a dark red area, what this is saying is the statistic or the probability that you'll go from poverty to living a rich life. If you're in the red, then that means it's not likely that you will rise from poverty to becoming rich. And so once again, we see that same strip to the southeast. It's not advancing, it's not changing, it's not progressing like you'll see in the rest of the country. In the rest of the country, there's more opportunity, there's more equality. But here in the South, where we've had civil rights, we've had slavery, we've had a war, it's not changing as fast. It's not creating equality like exists in the other parts of the country. Societies may experience differing rates and types of growth due to their varied geographical makeup. Based on your geography, your state may grow, it may not grow. It may grow really fast. For example, California, big explosion of people. 100,000 people moved to California in 1 year in 1849. Why? Because they discovered gold. So people flocked all the way across the country. That actually happened in not Charlotte, but it happened in North Carolina in 1799. A lot of people moved to the state. People also didn't move to North Carolina at first because of that coast, that darn coast, that coast that we all hate, the coast that prevents shipping and allowed people to live in Virginia and South Carolina. Your geography determines a lot of times whether people will move and how fast they'll move. An example is the triangle, a big exploding area where everyone was moving to, where there are jobs. And so now people are moving at an enormous rate. Before the triangle, people weren't really moving to this area. And now people are moving fast and fast and fast. And it's based on the geography, the human geography and the physical geography. And you can see here population changes right here. The light colors are areas where people are moving away from. The dark colors are where people are moving to. You should think to yourself, well, why are people moving to certain areas? Maybe it's based on weather. Maybe they want to live on the beach. Maybe there are jobs. Maybe it's based on the culture, the beliefs of the people. Maybe it's based on religion. Those are all examples. But it's different in different areas. And remember North Carolina, there on the left is Rip Van Winkle. People didn't move to North Carolina because there wasn't infrastructure. There wasn't roads, so people couldn't move to North Carolina. Formal boundaries. Formal boundaries are official boundaries. Those are the lines, like between each state. Those are formal. Each state has a legal boundary. You need to know what a vernacular boundary is. Like, for example, that's the South. Some people refer to that as the South. It's not official. There's no line that says this is the South. Most people call this the Midwest. It's just our own beliefs of what we consider an area. You could consider that the Southwest. This is New England. Those are just vernacular regions. Areas that we kind of refer to. Functional are regions organized around something. Maybe they revolve around a road, like the triad is kind of centered around a bunch of highways. The triangle is an area that functions around research and universities and schools. This is South Point Mall, South Point, and all the malls that revolve around it. There's no legal South Point. It is a functional. It usually revolves around an area or something. Duke's campus. There's no legal lines of Duke's campus. It just revolves around something. Here you'll see Cincinnati has a functional geography around their stadiums. You need to know these 4 characteristics.